Oh, thank you. So about 7, 8 months ago, we were having a conversation, and Reverend Laura said, would you like to come to the center? We're going to have a beautiful new center. You're going to love this labyrinth we're putting together. When we chose the date, it seemed really far away. Time is doing a strange thing for us now. And then we realized, actually, it was Groundhog Day. So I am here with only bad news today. Only bad news. We're talking about a shadow. We're talking about a real shadow because our beloved groundhog says we're going to have some more winter. When we think of the groundhog and the idea that they come out and see their shadow and there's a bit of a surprise for all of us, we may not really think that there can also be a disagreement, but I have some bad news as well. There's a disagreement around Groundhog Day. So, you might be going to church out of habit on Sunday and you wonder on the drive, am I going to learn anything today at church? Well, you're going to learn some things today because I have brought with me a fact sheet about Groundhog Day. According to folklore, a cloudy Groundhog Day on which the groundhog cannot see his shadow after coming out of hibernation signifies spring weather that will arrive before the equinox. A shadow, on the other hand, means 6 more weeks of winter. I regret to inform you that that is what happened this morning for our Puxatawny Phil in Pennsylvania. But did you know that because we're bordered here on the United States by 2 other countries that create North America, Canada and Mexico, I'm going to balance the news today. Maybe it's not quite so bad as that. In the life that I live right now, I spend my time between those 2 countries. I'm Canadian, so you may hear an accent. Oh, I see a wave in the audience, another Canadian, and Mexico, another Canadian. Okay, so I spend my time mostly between those 2 bordering countries. And I have to tell you right now, it's feeling like bookends to a very interesting story. Somewhat unbelievable, actually. No matter what side of that book you're on and what side of that story, it's been a very interesting week. So in Canada, we also celebrate Groundhog Day. As a matter of fact, in North America, the first Groundhog Day is celebrated in Nova Scotia because of time zones. They're ahead. I'm actually from Newfoundland, and while we don't have a groundhog in the easternmost point of North America in Newfoundland, we do have a lot of February 2nd, so we get to watch the rest of the world a half an hour ahead of everybody else in North America. And then in Mexico today is the Dia de la Candelaria, which is 40 days after the birth of Jesus. And something interesting happens today, where on January 6th, on King's Day in Mexico, there's the cake, the king's bread. And interestingly, if you eat the king's bread and you get the little baby Jesus in there, then on February 2nd, you're the person who buys the tamales for the same group in a party. Now, we know that we're keeping up with economic times because the people I know who are buying tamales today ate a cake, a bread, on January 6th, and they said, well, I was only one of 4 people that got the baby Jesus, so we're splitting the cost of the tamales today. It's interesting when tradition keeps up with the economy like that. But let's go back to this Groundhog Day and the shadow. So we have 4 other groundhogs, well, one of them is a lobster actually. We have 4 other animals that signify whether we're going to have a longer or a shorter winter in Canada. The other 4 in Canada, one is here, and that is your Phil, who really disappointed us this morning, I have to say. But we actually have Sam, who lives in the wildlife park in Nova Scotia, and he saw his shadow this morning, predicting 6 more weeks of winter. And then Lucy the lobster in Barrington, Nova Scotia, saw her shadow and predicted 6 more weeks of winter. And then Fred la Marmotte in Quebec predicted 6 more weeks of winter as well. So there is one out of the 5 that did not disappoint us today, and I'd like to introduce you to him. This is Wyerton Willie in the town of Wyerton, Ontario, a couple of hours outside of Toronto. This is me in 2016 with Wyerton Willie and the then mayor of Wyerton. And you cannot make this stuff up. We were putting this talk together, and I said to Laura, I have a bona fide picture with the groundhog in Canada that does Groundhog Day. And we could not believe that we went and found this picture and put it in here. But Wyerton Willie has predicted an early spring after he did not see his shadow on Sunday morning. My bet is on him. That's my preference. There's enough bad news in the world, right? So already you're walking away with some interesting things to entertain people with at lunch or dinner today. You're going to say, I was at church and I learned some things. So let me give you a few other facts. So I have 11 facts in total here. We're on number 3. Your Phil, that groundhog, is considered immortal. Do we know if he's ever swapped out? We don't want to talk about that. That's like down in the level of Santa Claus, and we're staying away. The groundhog's average lifespan is only 6 to 8 years. But however, legend has it that America's favorite groundhog, this Phil, regularly drinks a magic elixir that extends his life by 7 years. And every year he drinks that in his hometown at the town's annual groundhog picnic in the summer. And this is how he stays immortal. Some of us in the audience are thinking, where is that stuff? And I'm going to go there. Fact number 4, groundhogs are good eaters. A groundhog only weighs about 13 pounds itself, but it can eat more than a pound of food in one sitting. It reminds me of some of the images I've seen at buffets in this town. And then groundhogs are really rather industrious. They're very good workers. They are known for digging huge burrows to live in, and they can move up to 700 pounds of soil to create that home. And then when the groundhog builds its home, it actually builds a bathroom. How civilized. It's a designated place away from the space where the family sleeps and stores its food. So it's a separation of things. Isn't that interesting? Fact number 6, February 2nd isn't just a random date. Groundhog Day falls on the 2nd of February for a reason. It's what's known as a cross-quarter day, meaning it falls at the midpoint between one season and the other. In the case of February 2nd, it's the cross-quarter day that falls between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. Interesting. Making it the ideal time to consider whether or not spring will arrive. I'm going with this guy. Number 7, traditional celebrations once involved eating the groundhog. Yeah, the very first Groundhog Day celebration took place in 1860 and was hosted by a group of elders at the Groundhog Club. And they considered their namesake to be a delicacy in addition to a natural meteorologist. And so then they cooked the groundhog meat in a menu staple on Groundhog Day, and it became a picnic. And those who enjoyed it said that it's a cross between chicken and pork. Okay. Number 8, we're moving along. Phil owes his status as a household name to actor Bill Murray. Anyone seen that movie, Groundhog Day, where we get to repeat again and again until we learn the lesson? That feels like life, doesn't it? So Gobbler's Knob traditionally has seen an influx of tourists on February 2nd, but with the release of this movie in 1993, it's actually caused numbers to jump to over 35,000. So it must be difficult to get a hotel room in that town. But at the time of that movie, that the town itself was only 7,000 people. So 35,000 people descend on that town. It's like a convention of accountants when they come here, right? Number 9, statistically speaking, groundhogs aren't particularly good meteorologists. Yeah, 4 to 5 today. You can pick. And to hear Phil's handlers tell it, he has a pristine weather prediction record that reflects 100% accuracy. But in reality, it's around 37 to 39% accuracy. That's in our favor today, right? Currently, the most accurate groundhog lives in Yellowknife, California, and has 50% accuracy rate. Yes. So number 10 here, the Groundhog Day was almost a Badger Day instead, because it originally evolved from the Candlemas, that same tradition that is still celebrated in Mexico today. And it was a celebration of both literal and religious light. And Candlemas itself has also been a day where people used animals to speculate the weather. For instance, medieval cults held parties by bears' dens while they waited for the grizzlies to wake up from hibernation and go check the weather. Both English and German Catholics did something similar with badgers. So when Germans settled in Pennsylvania, they found badgers were hard to come by. So the switch was made to the groundhog. You know more than you ever wanted to know about Groundhog Day right now. Right? Okay, last one. This is a fun one. Phil has a wife. And they both dig a good read, apparently, because he's no longer a bachelor these days, and being the prognosticator of prognosticators, when Phil and Phyllis are busy looking for their shadows on Groundhog Day, they quietly reside at the Memorial Library in their town, and we can only guess what they like to read about most. There you go. So you heard it here, folks. And my money is still with Wyatt and Willie. These are interesting times, aren't they? So when we consider the concept of a shadow, and there's even a body of work we call shadow work, if you want to dig into that. And so many of you might be looking at me thinking, why would I want to dig into that? Why do I want to look at something that's buried in the darkness in my own life? Wikipedia says that the shadow for us is a negative function within the self, that it can include everything outside the light of consciousness. I didn't adjust that. That word consciousness is actually used in the description. It is an unconscious aspect of the personality that does not correspond with the ego ideal. So I like to think I'm this kind of person, but when my shadow comes up, maybe I'm over here in the dark, see? I am more in my shadow. Stuff is coming up that maybe I don't necessarily want to put on display, not the best parts of me. But this can lead to the ego to resist and project the shadow, creating conflict with it. So when I witness this in my own life, I think, well, I'm still here. That's why I'm here. When I'm done with this, I'm done. So then I don't need to be here. So as long as I'm here, I guess I'm working on things, right? And that's why I'm here. So my thinking goes in a loop about it. But I like that way of thinking because it makes sense to me. And then when others come to me, as they sometimes do, and share something about themselves that they're unhappy with, I will often say, well, you're looking at that. And don't be so upset about it, because if you had resolved it by now, you wouldn't need to be here. And look, you're still here. Isn't that wonderful? But the word projection is in there. And so when we see something about ourselves and we don't really want to deal with it or acknowledge it or address it, we don't want to think of ourselves as a jerk, selfish, anything that has a negative connotation. So sometimes what we do is we see it in others, and then we invite and attract others around to play that out. Isn't that fun. And the closer the people are to us, the more we're able to play that out, which is why relationships are such wonderful mirrors for our shadow. It's like if you develop the awareness and the consciousness to be able to have fun with your shadow, then you can actually look at yourself behaving this way and say, look at me being all jealous right now. Well, that is fascinating. But it takes a little work to get to the place of not putting a good or bad label on that. And to not put a good or bad label on other people's behavior. It's kind of like dealing with children that have or two dogs, that have like a situation happening. And you think, oh, they're not bad dogs, bad children, just having a bad moment. They're exhibiting bad behavior. They're not a difficult person. They're exhibiting difficult behavior. And when we can separate that so that our behavior doesn't become the automatic stamp of who we are, we can do that for other people too. Sometimes we're kinder to other people than we are to ourselves. But if we can get curious, we can certainly move through some of what the shadow creates for us. So the 3 hallmarks of a shadow is that it feels negative. Even if it's not negative, it has an uncomfortable feeling, and you want to get rid of that stuff as fast as you can, so you project it out. And then also that it is often unconscious until it's made conscious, until we become aware. And it is so automatic. I'll sometimes work with people who have an anger situation is the easiest example. And they will say to me, my boss drives me crazy. And I have the same argument with them. And we just find ourselves in these arguments. I'm arguing all the time. I'm going to lose my job. I'm getting a reputation. Can you help me? And so I think of it as like a 1 to 10 ruler kind of thing. And I say, so when you are angry at your boss, on a scale of 1 to 10, when do you become aware? And they're like, probably like 8.5, 9. And I'll say, well, what happens at 8.5 or 9? Do you just like pop out of the situation, become all of a sudden aware and conscious and think, oh, here I am again, angry? And they say, yeah, pretty much. And so I'll say, well, what happens at like 2 or 5 or 7, or do you just blow past those? Oh yeah, I just go past them. I've got the BMW method, 0 to 8.5 in 3 seconds, and I don't see any of it. So then we work together to develop that awareness and the consciousness of what a 3 looks like, and what a 5 looks like, and what a 7 looks like, so that they can make choices along the path. Am I going to go there? And sometimes you're sitting at 3 and you're in a really angry situation, and you have an intention. You think, oh, I'm so going to 7 today with this situation. But it's a different thing to go with intention versus it being automatic and totally out of your control. So how do you know that you're in shadow stuff? How you know is that the shame, blame shows up. So shame is an inward experience. Oh, I'm a bad person. I shouldn't have done that. Blame is the outward. Okay, I'm uncomfortable. Who's causing this? And go looking like a spray. And so I call this the innie-outie experience. You're having either an innie shame or an outie blame, or a bit of both, right? And you have discomfort, and you want to get that outside yourself. Living in consciousness and progressing on your spiritual journey means that you are able to sit in discomfort and observe yourself. So if you have a desire to hide something inward or avoid something out there, you're probably in a shadow situation. Now, Ralph Waldo Emerson has this wonderful quote, and I love that it represents our sunshine, because we are made of both light and dark elements. We are made of easy and difficult, of so-called good and bad. We are a blend, and that is making life interesting for us. And so when we keep something hidden, then we're outside our sunshine. The 5 biggest triggers of the shadow, no surprise what you're seeing on the screen here. Feeling criticized all of a sudden can have us feel like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. I need to do something about this. Believe it or not, success, sometimes tied to number 5, money or not, but success, notoriety, getting attention brings about this factor of feeling like you're an imposter. Maybe you don't really deserve. And then that is a ripe path for your shadow to come out and play, da, 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 I am here. We're going to have a little fun together. Love, that real closeness, the closer somebody gets to you, the more you begin to feel uncomfortable because you can't hide your own things. And I know in my relationship, it's always interesting to go through a problem I've gone through before the relationship. Walking through a problem or challenging situation in your life with somebody right there is a very interesting experience, and you have nowhere to go. You have to deal with or create fights or drama or trauma, all the fun stuff, right? But it is right there. And the ability for us to see the light and be in consciousness around what are the uncomfortable elements of ourselves. When we invite a relationship into our lives, we invite that. And that can be friends and family as well. So any big change also makes us a little uncomfortable. A move, a job, a retirement. People retire and their partners need to find something to do because they are not used to having that person around. And it's really interesting because it's supposed to be a supposed beautiful experience. We've been waiting our whole lives. And then the first 6 months are a shit show in the house. And you're thinking, how did I get here? Wasn't I in love with this idea? Maybe I need to go back to work. So many people go back to work and we wonder why. Shadow. The last of the 5 is money, and Reverend Laura has a new book to help with that, and so stick around afterwards. So Carl Jung, who really pioneered the shadow work, has this wonderful quote, again, about the conscious, unconscious. These are not created. These quotes are not created in the last 12 months. I mean, this has been around. This is a wonderful experience to know that we are moving into something that is destined for us. As a human being, we want to move the unconscious of ourselves, of all of our parts, out into the conscious. Because if we don't, then we will call it fate. And I get the awesome experience sometimes of telling people around me, and sometimes myself, hey, if you don't deal with it this time, you're coming back to deal with it again. How's that, right? Yeah, that's exciting. So just deal with it. A lot of people leave this iteration of life without having dealt with things. So it'll be waiting for you, kind of like the shadow and the groundhog. It'll be waiting next year. So in closing, I want to tell you that there's a way out of this. There's some good news in all of this bad news I've come to deliver today. That mindfulness, consciousness journey, your science of mind teachings, the work and the workshops and the conversations and the friendships that happen in a center like this move you forward above much of the population of the country, of the planet, in being able to self-reflect, in being able to generate awareness, in being able to actively acknowledge each other and yourself when you're in the shadow, when you are moving and transcending past something that has previously been difficult. And then the acceptance of the non-perfection of the self. Maybe you're ready for that. Maybe you're not. But nobody gets to move through all of this without having to deal with all of this, because the this that is here is so present for us right now. So the good news, you have everything you need to handle this situation. And so I invite you this coming week, when you go back out into the world with all your information and interesting tips for meeting up with people today or this week. Did you know? This week, notice what we want to throw outside of ourselves. What is a little uncomfortable and you're like, I want to get rid of that. I want to walk away from that conversation, that idea. What you want to throw outside of yourself or get away from is the shadow that is there for you to work with. And it's beautiful that you have all these tools. It's great that it is out there for us because if it moves out into the light of consciousness, it diminishes its negative impact on us. And in consciousness, it too, like the groundhog shadow, can be seen. Thank you.